All right, hopefully this time it actually works. So, all right, we have a few people in here. I am having technical difficulties scheduling this thing, so that apparently I'm not able to use the existing link via StreamYard. I had no idea. So we'll just kind of give people a little bit more time to filter in, and then we'll get started. All right, so good to know the sound and video is okay. So we have about 27 people in here. So I'm just making sure I have everything on my magic screen, and then we should be good to go. All right, so welcome everybody to the first and hopefully not only live stream about switching to Linux from another platform. So I've never done a live stream about this in particular before, so I thought this will either be fun or it'll be a train wreck because everything will just go bad. But so far, I think it's going okay despite a little delay in getting started. So yeah, I kind of knew that Arch Linux question would come up. I think we have to be within reason, because if I start switching people to Arch Linux, I think I'd have to have a session for every one user, or at least a 10-minute session for everyone. So I don't think we could do that. But we're going to try to do as much as we can, answer questions, things like that, maybe offer some guidance if someone's running into a problem. So during this time, you could download whatever distro you're thinking about starting with, get it installed on a flash drive. If you haven't already backed up your computer yet, do that. Absolutely do that. The disclaimer I have to give you guys is, I'm not responsible if you totally destroy everything or you lose data. Obviously, back up your files and things like that before you do anything. And if you're having problems with Wi-Fi, we could talk about that too. I did put a video out recently about Wi-Fi, so you might want to watch that. But I'll still help you guys out even if you haven't watched it. So, all right. So I'm just going to watch the comments for a while, and then we'll get started. And if you guys have some questions, you could go ahead and start asking. I think there might be a little delay in the chat. So I need to do this more often because I feel like I'm a little bit outside of my comfort zone with this. So is there a keyboard shortcut to clear the clipboard? I don't remember off the top of my head. I know that most distributions, if it's running X11 or Xorg, it'll time out. It'll time that out anyway. You might want to check try using like a clipboard manager, because I'm sure you can get more options out of that than you can via the defaults. You're welcome, James. I love making content. This is so much fun. I just feel like I'm in such a great place to make content about something that I enjoy and share it with everyone. And people apparently like it, and they keep watching. So I guess it's a good fit. Hello from the UK. Hi, Steve. Thanks, Jefferson. Yeah, the Ansible series was a lot of fun to record for sure. That was a long time coming. I've been using Ansible for a long time, so I was really happy to finally do a series on that. In XFCE, is there an option to increase mouse sensitivity? I think so, but I don't know for sure. I haven't used XFCE in a long time. It's really, really great. If anybody has a current installation, I know it's all about switching you guys to Linux, so I don't expect anyone already has it installed. But if you do and you happen to be using XFCE, if you could check that in the mouse settings, that would be pretty cool. I do know that depending on the version of XFCE, some of the features that are very common in desktop environments and have been common for a while, some of those are missing in earlier versions. So make sure you're using a newer version. I know that probably goes without saying, but XFCE sometimes has some catching up to do. All right. Just watching the comments. Let's see what we have here. Have you ever used Gentoo? I have several times. I'm not very familiar with Gentoo anymore. I want to say it was probably 2016, maybe 2015, the last time I've used it. So there's going to be some distributions that unfortunately I won't be able to help much with because I'm not very familiar with the distribution. Gentoo is on my list of things to maybe become more familiar with. I just don't have an ETA on that. But as of today, I probably wouldn't be the best person on Gentoo, unfortunately. All right. Have you got a Steam Deck? Yes. Oh, sorry. I don't have a Steam Deck. Every time I see, I don't know what it is. Someone mentions Steam Deck, I think Stream Deck. It's just one letter off. I have a Stream Deck. I don't have a Steam Deck, unfortunately. I'm hoping to get one, though. It would be a lot of fun to check out. Absolutely. I love games, and I think people that have been following the channel know that. So if I can get my hands on one of those, I'll definitely do a video on it. But I did put a pre-order in, but I must not have been chosen. So maybe eventually. All right, so Ansible is out now, so you should be able to see that. If you go to the main website, learnlinux.tv, there should be a section there to go ahead and watch that. So someone's asking, are you going to be going through a walkthrough of a complete setup? Not really. I'm going to help you guys out with switching to Linux if you guys are in the process of that. Now, this is kind of one of those things where a live stream for switching to Linux is kind of experimental because I can't see your screen as far as I know. I don't think there's a way to do that. So maybe this might not have been the best platform, but we'll just kind of get the bugs worked out. And if I do this again, I'll make sure there's a way you guys can share your screen because I think that would be the best way to do it if you're having a problem. But depending on where you're at in the install, you might not even have a connection yet to share your screen. So that may or may not be helpful. We're just going to feel our way through this. And I think if we keep this going, then every time I do it, it's just going to get better. So just pardon the dust. Yeah, Michael, I agree that the Arch install script, I believe you're referring to that Python script that they put on the ISO. I like it. You know, I really do. I really like that a lot. It makes it a lot easier to install Arch for sure. And I'm glad they did that. You know, interesting fact, when I first started with Arch Linux for the very first time, it had an installer back then. I don't know if a lot of people remember that. It did. It totally had an installer. The new installer is new, yes, because it's a new installer, but it's not the first time they actually had an installer. At some point, I can't remember which year, they removed the installer from the ISO image. And that's when we started having to do all these manual things like a chroot and all that to get in there and configure our installation. They've been without an installer for quite a long time, and I'm glad they have one now. That was really cool of them to do that. It's kind of surprising because when they removed the installer, the original installer, I kind of thought they'd never go back and have another one, but here we are. All right, so I have an individual here. Looks like Kentucky Chem class, if I have that right. My work uses Windows, which, you know, big surprise, that happens a lot. How to best get my laptop with Linux Mint 20.3 to seamlessly connect to their network. Now, I'd have to know more information. So the more information I have, the better I can help. When I hear someone ask about connecting to the network, usually it's just a matter of plugging in the cable. DHCP gives you an IP address and you're connected. But if there's a specific thing that you're connecting to, like, I don't know, Active Directory, which I'm not super knowledgeable on, but I could give you guys some pointers on that. I'll try my best. Or if it's like, network shares that you're trying to connect to and things like that, let me know more specifically what it is that you want to access, and then we'll see if we have an answer. So we have a long-time Linux user. Hi, David. How's it going? So welcome. And it's great to have people of all, experience levels here because, you guys might know something that I don't. So I might call on you guys if someone asks a question that has me stumped, and it'll happen because even though I've been doing this for over 20 years, I'm always learning. There's new things to learn. There's never going to be a time where I know everything, and I'm happy for that because it keeps it exciting. So yeah, maybe you'll have an answer for something. All right, just getting caught up here. The wall hanging about your computer is crooked. Are you referring to the wall hanging things? Because those things keep moving. I need to redo that, actually. I think the camera could use some work with leveling as well. Yeah, someone says they can't wait to see my review of the Steam Deck. I don't know for sure that I will do a review. I think I will. If they send me one, then I plan to do that. But whether or not I do a review really just kind of depends on what all else I'm doing. So if I'm in the middle of a tutorial series, and I'm actually creating a few right now, I just don't have time for that. But hopefully when I do get the Steam Deck, it'll come to me at a time that I have time to look at it and give you guys my thoughts on it. And I'm sure I'll have some interesting thoughts. And I don't know much about the Steam Deck. I've been intentionally avoiding the news because I kind of don't want my opinion to be colored by others. I just kind of want to go in knowing very little and just experience it. And then I'll write the treatment for the review that way, assuming I do one. I think I will, though. We'll see. Yeah, Jamie, I probably should reach out to Valve. I don't know where to contact them exactly, if anybody knows. I did put in the pre-order basically when you were first able to do that. And I just assumed that my email address, considering it has Learn Linux TV in the email address, would be enough. And often it is. I've had some cases where I'll buy something, out of my own money, which is what I usually do anyway, whenever I can. And I was able, basically they'll see that I'm from the YouTube channel just based on that domain, but I must not have got their attention that way. I don't even know why I thought I would, but yeah, that's probably the better option for me. Yeah, I think you have a point there. So Jefferson is curious about whether or not I have any hobbies. I have a bunch. I am a huge retro gaming collector. I lost count, honestly. Like pretty much every console Sega's ever put out, every console Sony has put out, Nintendo, um, Sega. I have like all those. I've lost count over how many game systems I actually have, and I have multiples as well. So I might have like, if they release multiple editions, I'll get each edition. Like for the Sega Genesis, I have the Model 1, the Model 2. Super Nintendo, I have both of those models that they put out. Actually, I probably have more. Yeah, big retro gaming collector. I am into martial arts, but because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to do that as often lately. But photography, I love photography, music. There's all kinds of things that I'm into, but retro gaming, I would say, is probably my number 2 hobby. Linux is number 1, retro gaming is number 2. I just love the older games. They're just so much fun. So, John, in regards to your question, you have Ubuntu 2004 LTS, and you want to know if it is a good idea to upgrade to 2204 when that's released. Short answer is yes. Long answer is I don't think I ever recommend going in blind and just doing it, just throwing caution to the wind and just upgrading. What you could probably do instead, and this is true of pretty much anything, run 2204 in live mode first. Make sure your hardware works. Go to a website, listen to music on YouTube or something. Just make sure your audio is working. All the things. If you use multiple monitors, plug them in. Just make sure that you test all of your hardware first before you upgrade. Take a backup, snapshot, whatever you do, and then go ahead. I don't think there's any reason to wait like a lot of people do, as long as you've tested the environment with a live environment. I think I don't know why. It's like a lot of people don't do that. I'm not saying you don't. Obviously, I'm not talking about you here, but I've noticed that for some reason live mode isn't as popular as I think it should be. So that's why I keep saying it over and over again. I'm trying to boost the popularity because it's an amazing way to find out if your hardware is compatible, even if it's not an upgrade. If you just want to pave and reload, basically. You could just download the distro of choice that you want to check out, create a bootable flash drive. I use USB Imager for that. It's my personal favorite at the moment. And then you could just run it in live mode without it making any changes to your hard drive. Just hit the try mode, demo mode, whatever they call it. And you should be able to find out, for the most part, if it's going to work. There are some edge cases where if you try it in live mode, it works fine. And then some people, something doesn't work after it's installed. It's so rare it does happen, but it's so rare that I usually don't mention that. Just try it in live mode and see. Let's see. What else do we have? Favorite desktop window manager. So my favorite desktop environment is GNOME. I use GNOME on everything. I feel like it just helps me be the most productive. So everyone has their favorites, obviously, that caters to their use style. I really like GNOME, and I've liked GNOME for quite a long time. I don't use window managers anymore, although I might take another look. I get a little nervous when something hasn't been updated in a while. OpenBox has been my favorite when it comes to window managers, but last I checked, it hasn't been updated. And the counter argument there often is, well, it doesn't need to be updated. It works. It's fine. Mission successful. They achieved their goal and it does the thing. But I would, I do feel that lateral movement is still possible, and antiquated code that's not updated is a problem. So I'm not as likely to use OpenBox anymore, even though I still adore it. I might check out Sway. I've been really liking what I've seen from that so far, but for right now, GNOME is my number one favorite. I just really love using it. Can I do a video on Pipewire and Wayland? I might. I don't know yet. I'm still kind of trying to figure out an angle on that because, it really kind of depends on the context, and I want to create videos that help a lot of people. So I need to approach that in a way that is going to be helpful for as many people as possible, which could be targeting maybe a very popular scenario with that, or maybe even one video that goes through a bunch of smaller scenarios. So I'm not sure, to be honest, but I'll keep that in mind. I maintain a list that has all kinds of stuff on there that I can pull from when I do content. So I'll consider it. So Bruce wants to know about, let's see, I'm unsure of which laptops are the most compatible and if I have a list. I don't maintain a list because laptop models come out like every year. It's just so hard to keep track. Ubuntu has a hardware compatibility list that you can look at, but they're not always up to date either. What I find is usually the best way to go if you have the money, because it really depends on your budget. So if you want to go brand new, there's System 76. There's also, and there's other vendors as well that you could consider. And I'm trying to think, what's the name of that? I don't know why I'm blanking on the name. I literally have Tuxedo. I don't know why it took me so long to come up with that. Tuxedo, they make Linux laptops and desktops as well. If you want something cheaper, like if you're on a budget or something, the Dell Latitude laptops and also the ThinkPad T series on eBay. I don't know if you want new or used, but you could often save a lot of money buying used. And some of these business class laptops, even when they're a couple of generations old, they're still really good, really fast. You'd be surprised. They could feel like brand new. And more often than not, the ThinkPad T series is pretty compatible. But what you have to do is research it, though, because every now and then a model comes out that's not really friendly. There's no 100% way to know. The downside with ThinkPads is that unless they stop doing this, you can't replace the Wi-Fi cards. I don't like that. So I kind of give a little bit of a, some bonus points to Latitude because I've never had Dell Latitudes that stopped me from upgrading the Wi-Fi chip. You may not need to upgrade Wi-Fi. Basically, if it comes with Intel, you're fine. As long as it's not Debian. Debian needs some more things there. Intel is usually fine. If it comes with like Realtek or like Broadcom, any of those, it might work fine, but it also might not. I think Wi-Fi is usually the one that's going to bite you. So if it's a ThinkPad with an Intel card, it should be fine. They had a ThinkPad model with like this touch strip, kind of like how Apple was doing. They stopped doing this. They don't do that now. Don't buy that one. I think that one has some issues as well. And then Dell Latitudes are also a good one to pick. And there's Think Penguin. I think theirs are a lot older though. So just proceed with caution there. You could also see what's available in your area via like some sort of marketplace if you have a local classified kind of thing. All right, so I'm glad someone brought this up because I can't pronounce. So Last, I think, is the name. I'm sorry. Sometimes I have trouble pronouncing names. Um, when will we see all games run on Linux without wine and such thing? Never. I wish I didn't have to say that, right? Because I think the mindset should be adjusted. It's kind of like asking, when are all Sega Genesis games going to be supported on Super Nintendo? They're different platforms. You can't really expect all of the software on one platform to one day magically work on a platform that the developers of that game or that application have never intended it to work on. So you have to think of it in terms of, this code was written in most cases, unless it was like a cross-platform development library. The code was written for Windows. If it's a Windows game, it's a Windows game. It's always going to be a Windows game, unless they take the time to create a Linux port, which I don't feel all games will ever do, because, if a game is 10 years old, are they still updating it? Probably not. If a game is still supported, then we can probably make a case to get it converted over. So I'm not really sure that that's a expectation that we can really entertain. So anytime you have software made for one platform and you're trying to get it to work on a different platform it was never intended to work on, you will always have to use something to force it to work. There is just, Linux is not Windows, Windows is not Linux. That's important to keep in mind. If people are wondering what I do to tackle this problem, I have a video that was it was about a game streaming server. It runs Windows, but it's headless, and you could just use Steam streaming to play the games on Linux. And that's a solution that you could consider. I've also basically built I almost call it a Windows PC, but it is because Windows is installed on it, but I never see it. It's basically Steam in big picture mode, and it boots right into Steam. It's hooked up to a TV. I have a Steam controller plugged into it, so I never really see the interface. It's just my dumb gaming box, basically. So I don't really feel the need personally to run games on Linux. Linux is me for getting things done, browsing the internet, basically everything except for games. I know that's not what people want to hear, but that's currently what we have and what the situation is. And well, if there's a better solution, I will definitely let you guys know. Please do some gaming for us. I don't think I'm set up for that right now, because if I switch over to my laptop, I'm not sure how the lag would be in the screen recorder. Then I'd have to install a game on, and there's no games installed on this one in particular. So maybe another time I'll make sure I'm able to do that. What's your preference for Linux laptops? Currently, System 76. I just really love the way that they do it. Their custom firmware that they write, their customer service is great. I've literally seen them, release a firmware update just because someone on Twitter mentioned something, and like one person mentioned it, and then all of a sudden an update comes out because the person had a point apparently, and there was a issue. They were quick to fix it. I really love the fact that they're quick to fix things. So I would say System 76 is my favorite for vendors. Second place is ThinkPad, or the Lenovo ThinkPad, the T series. I love the T series. Assuming, of course, it comes with Intel, because, like I've mentioned earlier, if you were here, I don't know why Lenovo has a history of blocking Wi-Fi cards, which I don't think is appropriate at all. And shame on them for doing that. But other than that one problem, I really do like them quite a bit. Intel or AMD? AMD. Basically across everything. When it comes to GPUs and CPUs, I like AMD. They seem to be the easiest to get working. For example, AMD video cards, they just work. You don't have to install a driver. If you go to the driver manager in Ubuntu, it'll literally tell you that no proprietary drivers are installed, but it's working fine. It's just a magic thing. I love it so much. All right. So flat car, I'm not really familiar with that. I would wonder, Patrick, if user local bin is mounted and there's like a no execute flag set there, like what are the mount options? I'm not really sure, so I don't want to lead you astray on that, but I would just double check if you check them out command, see if there's anything in there that leads you to believe that executables are blocked. Just a quick theory, so we'll see if that's worth anything. Would love more content on disk encryption. That's sent in by Mockingbird. So you know what? That's a good idea. So here's what I'm going to do. You are going to see me right now. Well, actually, you can't see this, but I am opening up a text editor. I do this a lot. I just jot some notes down. So I will do, let's see, encryption content. I will make sure to add that to my master list after I'm done recording here to make sure it's on my list. So that way I can see where that falls. I think I did do a video at one time, but if I did, it'd be so outdated that I'm not even going to point you to it because, you know, at some point it just gets to be too old. So I'll check and see if I already have one. If I do, I'll probably remove it and replace it with something new. I don't have an ETA, but thank you for that suggestion. That's a really good one for sure. Tim V wants to know which martial arts I practice. Tung Sudo. I'm currently Red 2, which is like halfway through Red Belt. Red Belt is right before Black. I have been out of it since the pandemic started, though, so I'm a bit rusty. I need to get back into it, and I do intend to do that. Hopefully when things slow down. So there's that. And let's continue on. What is Wayland? That's what Tech Taron wants to know, if I am pronouncing that correctly. So basically Wayland, how can I, so some of these things are really hard to explain in simple terms when I, you know, didn't take the time to write a script to make it simple. It's basically the way that windows are drawn on the screen. We have Xorg currently, so the letter X, O-R-G, that's Xorg. And that's been, I want to say, since the second version of Ubuntu. That's the first time I think I remember Xorg coming out. So don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it was a second Ubuntu release that switched from X11 to Xorg, which has been taking care of this for us. And the argument is that Xorg has been like not maintained very well, that there could be some bloat, security issues, or just bad code. I don't know how much of that is true, but that they've made the case that it's just really hard to maintain and fix. So they kind of just decided to start over with something new. I will say though that Wayland seems faster to me. It could just be my imagination, but it does kind of seem like things are butter smooth, but there's some things missing. Like if you think about the things that we take for granted, like screen recording, when I last used Wayland, it was last year I used it last, and I wasn't able to record the screen. So honestly, that's not going to really be a problem for everyone, but there's some of those things that are problematic that they're still working out right now, and it's been going on for a long time. It's slow. Personally, I predict that Xorg won't completely go away for a long time. Wayland will take over at some point, and it largely has in some distros. But what I think is going to happen, especially because, you know, even native games, the people that have made native games, they're not going to convert to Wayland. You know, if they're not really profiting on a game anymore, they don't have a reason to do that. So we have X Wayland that'll basically run Xorg enough to run the games and give them a place to run in, which is great that those things will still work and that makes the older things work. But that also kind of makes it so the developers have especially no reason to update it because it works in X Wayland. So why make it native? So that chicken and egg problem will still happen. I think that Wayland will become default on pretty much every distro within 5 years. It's going to take some longer than others. And then from there, I think X Wayland will just stick around for probably 10 years. I hope I'm wrong on that. It takes a long time for things to roll out in this industry. All right. When can we expect a review of Fedora 36 and Ubuntu 22.04? I usually aim for the same week that they're out. It depends on what all I have going on at the same time. So I usually get those out pretty quick and sometimes even on the same day. But I'm not really sure yet exactly when that'll happen. Just stay tuned to the channel. I will have a review of both. So you could definitely count on that. All right, so I'm just trying to get caught up and I lost my place here, so bear with me. So Jeff is wondering what my wife and kids are using, I don't have a wife, first of all, so I don't have that, but I do have kids that live with me all the time, and one is on Linux, the other is on Windows and Linux. So I basically don't have a rule that just because I have this preference means everybody also has to have the same preference. I'm a Linux user throughout. Obviously, if you were in my house and you walked in, you would see a Windows machine here and there. It would not be mine, nothing that I use. There's other people that live here. So whatever they use is what they use. I don't really force that. But pretty much I think everybody in this house except one uses Linux at least 50% of the time. It's just happenstance because for some people, if you have a resident knowledge person on something, it's a lot easier for people around you if they want to use it to go ahead and use it because they know that you'll help them out. So there's that. One moment. Let's see. Disk encryption techniques for VPS, remote server environments, specifically LVM. I'm literally going to copy all of that text right there and put it in my note file so that way I can consider everything that you said. And now, disclaimer though, the whole process of creating videos for me can sometimes take months. It's just the way it goes because I'll have a kind of like a queue of all the things I want to do. And then at the beginning of the month, I'll pick like 4 or 5 of those. And that'll be the videos for that month. And then it takes like 2 weeks to edit at that point. And then the next month, I'll go to my backlog. I'll grab some things and put that in the current list. So it could take anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. It just really depends. But you'll see it. It'll happen. I don't have an ETA, but thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that. Now, Peter says, don't use Wayland, just switch between window managers. Yeah, I mean, you can make a point for that. It really kind of depends in my mind what you're doing. I think for me, the only time I use Wayland is when it's a game. So I don't really play games on my computers much. I have the dedicated box for that. So yeah, I don't really know how much that probably doesn't apply to me, but it is what it is. Why Xorg doesn't support touchpad gestures as well as Wayland? That's what Lucas asked. I'm so glad you asked that. So actually, that statement isn't quite true, but it's the same statement that everybody is making, and it makes sense to me why people would think that's the case. Because, for example, if you have a GNOME distribution and you log into Wayland, you have gestures, but if you log into Xorg, then you don't. But that's a GNOME thing, actually. And I don't agree with this. GNOME's standpoint, I think, if I remember correctly, was since Wayland is taking over, they're not trying to make gestures work on Xorg and maintain it there and also maintain it in Wayland at the same time in parallel because that's a lot of work. So they're just putting it all in Wayland. Now, other distributions, other desktop environments, there's no technical reason why they can't use touchpad gestures. In fact, you can actually install TouchEgg on GNOME and any other distro that doesn't have that, mouse gestures and make mouse gestures happen. So you could force it in Xorg. It's just that GNOME themselves are not facilitating that. And that makes people angry sometimes because they feel like GNOME should be impartial. And I understand that. But at the same time, they don't have infinite developers there. So they can't pay attention to everything everybody wants them to. So sometimes they do have to make those hard decisions. And I don't like it, though. I feel like Xorg is going to be around for a long time, especially considering LTS distros still ship it. So I really feel like it's a mistake for GNOME not to do this. But then again, it could just be a matter of people not volunteering to help them out with that. So in the meantime, just use TouchEgg. If you want a reference, you can install or even just use in demo mode a newer version of Pop! OS. They use TouchEgg by default. They have it built in. So if you're wondering why mouse gestures work in Pop! OS, even on Xorg, that's why. So literally what I've done is I stole the config. So anytime I'm not using Pop! OS, I use Pop! OS most of the time. I literally grabbed their TouchEgg config and then I put it in other computers that are not running Pop! OS so that they also, even on Xorg, get gestures. So you could definitely make that happen. I currently switched to Windows ME because Windows XP sucks. I mean, does Windows ME work anymore? I mean, What software is available? I'm just wondering. I'm not trolling. I just want to know because I'm thinking like, which browsers can you download in 2022 that would still be downloadable for Windows ME? Hopefully you're not running out-of-date browsers there. Wayland screen recording works in OBS. That's true, it does. That was a recent feature. I was not able to get that to work on anything I tried it on, though. I installed OBS. Can't remember the distro that was Wayland. It wouldn't work. And the reason why is because the distro itself hasn't updated, or is it like one of those longer term distros that don't have bleeding edge packages, basically? So I sideloaded the OBS. I think I did. I'm trying to remember now. I think I sideloaded that in there and it still didn't work. But that was probably just a distribution specific thing. It's just an issue where it takes a while for all the distros to get caught up with one another, I think. Yes, I still train in martial arts, but I'm just taking a break right now because of the pandemic. I'm just trying to figure out, when I can go back. Can we see you laughing? Never saw you laughing. You might be watching some of my older videos, but I'm trying to be, let my personality come out more. It's hard when I have a camera staring at me. I'm like, oh, I'm nervous. I'm being recorded, even though it's not live. Well, it's live right now, but you could watch several of my videos. I have some funny ones out there like that dad. I think I laughed in the dad joke. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I did. We'll see. All right. So it looks like every time this chat refreshes, I lose my place. So bear with me, guys. I am so sorry. So Benjamin, you're mentioning that when you dual boot, Windows will be usable or will be able to utilize Ethernet, wired Ethernet, and Linux can only use wireless. So that means that your Ethernet card is not supported in Linux. That's what that means. Now, that could be that your motherboard, or if it's integrated Ethernet, for example, could be too new and your distribution is older than your motherboard. So the common rule of thumb here is that if you want to run Linux on a computer, the distribution that you are using should be the same age or newer than your chipset. If it's older, then if you think about it, the distribution can't know about hardware that was invented after that distribution came out. And that's often why that happens. So it might not mean that it's not supported. It might mean that your distribution just doesn't have that driver in there and you might need to go to a newer version. So for example, if you're running 2004 and your Ethernet card, motherboard, or whatever it is, came out after 2004, and if any of the subsequent updates didn't, get that support, it might start working in 2204, or you could try another distro. Sometimes, depending on the Ethernet card, it's like you could get the firmware and install it manually, but it really depends. You would have to probably use LSPCI. The LSPCI can find the model number of your Ethernet card and then Google that along with Linux. That's usually the only way you'll know, because you'll have other people complaining about the same thing. And if they fixed it, then you'll be able to see what they did to get it fixed. But it could be just a cat and mouse thing. It might just be that your distribution isn't new enough and your computer is new or newer. That is something that happens. So. All right. So Peter mentions that Apple has the best touchpad. I agree. I mean, I'll call it like I see it. I try not to be biased, even though I love Linux. If someone does it better, I'll mention it. I do like the touchpads on ThinkPads as well. And the Oryx Pro from System 76 has a really great touchpad. But I literally have I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of Apple's touchpad. I have one. It's right next to my keyboard, and I use it in Linux, because it works. So, I don't really feel like there's a problem with that. If you have a device and you like it better, then try and use it. And it works for me in Linux, so I don't really see a problem. The touchpads are fine. They're actually pretty good. I agree with that. So Skybreak wants to know why not dual boot. That might have been in response to someone else. So I personally don't like dual boots, and the reason isn't going to be popular, but I personally feel like an operating system and a computer is intended to be a one-to-one relationship, not a one-to-many or one-to-few relationship. Device, operating system. Now, the thing is, we're technologists. We love technology, and that's not what a lot of people want to hear. Because, and this is valid, you want to try different things, and there's nothing wrong with that. So people will do a boot because they want to try different operating systems, and honestly, that's a great thing to do to learn. But after you learn and you get to a point where you're comfortable, then, in my opinion, it starts to become, and I've seen this with other users as well, that start with dual boots, they'll eventually learn, and then they kind of just find themselves preferring one-to-one because it's simpler to maintain. I mean, if you think about it, when it's time to patch, you have to boot into Windows, run Windows Update, boot into Linux, patch that too. So you're maintaining two operating systems. You're creating more work for yourself. And Windows, expects to be the only operating system, although it can, dual boot, and we're able to do that. It's not uncommon for Windows to overwrite the boot sector, which drives me crazy when that happens. And then you lose your boot option for the Linux distro, and you have to go in and repair it. And all that's fine if you're willing to do that and you don't mind jumping in and intervening every now and then with your dual boot. I think that's okay. I feel like as I'm getting older, I just don't want to do that. And I think everything just seems to be better if you treat operating systems and devices as a one-to-one relationship. So a 2012 Mac Mini. So Joseph is going to be getting a hold of one of those. So which distro will work well? Well, here's the thing. When it comes to Macs, it's extremely inconsistent. Like I would see like someone using an older MacBook and Linux doesn't work on it, but it works on a newer version that's right after, but it could be flopped or flipped, and then maybe it works on the version before, doesn't work on the one after. It's just so hit or miss with Macs, and sometimes everything works fine, but it's sluggish and it just doesn't run fast. Other times it runs perfectly great and there's no problems at all. So unfortunately, that's just something you'll have to try. I have had, I think, the best experience on Mac personally with Ubuntu #1, Fedora #2. I think I actually did see a Mac computer that worked in Fedora, not Ubuntu, for some reason or another. So I would just have those handy, just to make sure. It's 2012, so you really shouldn't need a newer distro. You shouldn't have to be bleeding edge. You could just use like 2004, Ubuntu 2004. Fedora is rather bleeding edge, so that could be fine. So I would just try one of those and see how well you get on with it. Otherwise, you might have to Google like that model number and issues because it's so hit or miss. I can't even give you a prediction at this point. That's how different it is. So Michael mentions that his machine with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.5 with NVIDIA Xorg uses gestures. So if that's the case, then I wonder what Red Hat did to make that happen. GNOME isn't interested in making the gestures work on GNOME on Xorg. That doesn't mean the distribution can't put something in there. And it's interesting too, because if Red Hat is doing that, I would think that they would upstream that because they're usually pretty good at that. So I'd almost wonder if maybe you have TouchEgg installed. So I would just check your installed packages and see if that's among them. If it is, then that means that's probably how they're doing it. So Jordan mentions that I should start a series on free BSD. Unfortunately, I don't really think that's going to happen. It's not that I don't like it. I do. There's so many things I want to get into. I just can't get into all of them. And this isn't free BSD or learn free BSD TV. That's the problem. Or learn BSD TV. It's learn Linux.tv. So I do try to stay razor focused. Doesn't mean I won't cover it, but if I did, then I would have to start another channel because as much as I don't like it, YouTube, you have to be razor focused. I have seen people that cover many topics and sometimes they do very, very well, but it seems like more often than not, the people that are laser focused on one thing, they do the best, which is unlike cable TV channels, right? So if you're watching cable TV, they might have the news on in 1 hour, then like a sitcom on, and then after that they have like an action movie. You know, you have different types of things going on, your average cable channel. But YouTube is different. It's like like a one-to-one relationship. I keep using that term. Subject matter, channel name, all of that. It's just the way YouTube is. I don't really like it. Anyway, long story made short, it's out of scope, but never say never, because I could maybe start a secondary channel alongside this one that people that are fans of BSD could check out. But I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but you never know. So there's a question about tiling window managers and if they really increase productivity. I use tiling mode in Pop! OS, and I'm also currently playing around with Sway. I'm very new to Sway. I'm not ready to make the video. I could be ready in a couple of weeks, though. I love tiling. It really depends on how it's implemented, but you know, tiling is just one of those things that's just, you never know how useful it is until you use it. But it also depends on how you use it, as well as how it's implemented. So for example, in Pop! OS, we have tab stacks, which really makes this work for me, because the issue with tiling, in my opinion, is that it's really hard to have the same workflow on multiple machines. So for example, let's say you have a laptop, it has a 1080p screen on it. Tiling probably won't work out well there because you're already challenged with screen real estate. But if you have like a ultra wide, like I do, now that's where tiling really shines. But you're not going to have an ultra wide on a laptop, which means you're probably less likely to use tiling there. You can, and people do, but tab stacks, like what Pop! OS has, I feel like it makes tiling approachable on smaller screens as well, and that to me is what really made it cohesive. Now, Sway could probably do the same thing. I don't know. I'm just getting started out with that, but it really depends. I would just give it a try. Just give Pop! OS a try. You don't have to install it, but just turn on tiling mode and just give it a try for yourself and see if the feature resonates with you. If it does, then you'll have your answer. All right, so let's see. Any chance about DWM? I don't know yet. I have seen it. I'm out kind of on the fence, but maybe. You never know. All right, so let's get some more questions in there. I think I'm getting closer to the end. I hope I didn't miss any good ones. So if I might have skipped yours, you could go ahead and just repost that question in there. All right. All right, getting caught up. What are Active Directory alternatives for Linux? So there's free IPA, there's OpenLDAP, and some distributions actually support Active Directory. So if you already have an Active Directory controller, a domain controller, you can just use it if you would like to do that. But if you want to start up your own, I'm pretty sure it's free IPA is one. I'm trying to remember the name of Fedora's because they have one as well. Is it like 389? Because someone can help me with the name of it because I just can't remember for the life of me what they call it. So free IPA, OpenLDAP, and then Fedora's solution. How can I RDP to a Windows box from Linux? Download Remina. Am I saying that right? REMMINA. Again, that's REMMINA. And I'll just try to put it in the chat. I should probably make a habit of that anyway. So I will type it in. So there's Remina. That's what I use. And it also does more than RDP, which is why I like it. You can use SSH, RDP, VNC, X2Go, I'm pretty sure. So it supports a lot of those different protocols. So that's why I like it, because you can just have one and then you just connect everything from it. All right. And so David, yes, SyncThing does remove my need for any backup client. I have no backup clients installed at all on anything. So just to give you an idea, every laptop, every desktop, they all sync via SyncThing to my file server. So my file server always has the data that any of my computers would have. So any of my computers, the hard drive can go at any time and I'm good. So in order for me to lose data internally, the file server disks, that has to go bad. The disks on all of my laptops and desktops have to go bad, because I also have SyncThing keeping like historical versions as well. So I can get anything back from another machine. But then in addition to that, my TrueNAS server, which everything syncs to via SyncThing, actually now it's using a VM, but TrueNAS is still the underlying storage. It'll then clone that to a Synology disk station to have another thing to have it backed up on. And TrueNAS also sends the backups to Backblaze B2 for offsite. So I really don't need backup, because everything, like a backup agent, because everything is backed up immediately within like 30 seconds, you'll start seeing it transfer. So it's just not something that I really have to do. Those backup clients are pretty good. So I definitely understand the use case there, and not everyone's going to be a fan of SyncThing. But for me, SyncThing works. SyncThing is not a backup solution. But if you have SyncThing mirror your data to a backup server, then it kind of becomes that, because SyncThing is getting the data to its destination. So you could argue it's the same thing in that case. All right, let's see. Enlightenment desktop, I like it. I like it a lot. I don't know why I don't use it as my main. I think I'm just so satisfied with GNOME that I just haven't really had a reason to look elsewhere. And the only reason why I'm looking at Sway is because I'm just kind of curious how tiling is implemented in Sway versus how it's implemented in Pop! OS. Not that I have anything against Pop! OS or the Cosmic Desktop that it uses, but I do like Enlightenment. I did check out Bodhi Linux a number of times, and every time I do, I actually enjoy it. So and have nothing bad to say about it. So, Mark, I don't understand your question, because you're wondering about suggestions on sorting all the apps that are installed. They should automatically be installed in alphabetical order. I think is it Menu Libre that you could use to edit the menus if you wanted to change the names of things in the menu. You could also just remove packages that you're not using that aren't required by the system. And there's also the minimal modes that some distributions have, where they just don't really install much of anything other than what you need if you choose minimal mode. I think a lot of the Ubuntu spins have that now. So might need more information on that. All right, so getting there. All right, so Darth Dweeb asked if I use Privacy VPN. No, I don't. I mean, I might use VPN if I'm at like a Starbucks or something, if I feel the need to do like online banking or something like that, or if I have a laptop on me that has some kind of like private information, like financial information, I might use a VPN. But I work from home. I really don't use a computer outside the home very often. So for me, paying for a VPN service is kind of pointless, because I might use it once a month, maybe. But even if I'm only paying $5 a month, I could be paying $5 a month for something I'm barely using. But I also feel like VPN, the usefulness of it is over exaggerated. And I kind of feel like the VPN companies, they're to blame for this. Like, they'll tell you that it's going to make you bulletproof essentially, but it's not true. Within reason, VPN is useful. It's a tool. It's not fail-safe. There's still ways to get information out of it. DNS metadata, DNS lookups. If you're not using HTTPS for DNS or DNSSEC, for example, and even then, if you're doing all of that right, and the VPN vendor is saying they don't log anything, is that true? Do you know? Really? Are you on their server? If you spin up your own VPN, you could literally make the logging directory dev null, like literally just make it, delete all log entries as soon as they're recorded. And even if your VPN provider is doing a great job now, they might not be doing a great job tomorrow. They might get blown wide open tomorrow. So I'm a little hesitant to recommend VPN for anything other than connecting to endpoints, like two data centers or something like that. if you're just trying to protect your online banking, that makes total sense. But people go crazy about VPN like it's the best thing ever. It's a good tool, but you have to have a use case for it. So as far as which companies as of today, I'm always hesitant to recommend companies, because even though this is live, someone still might be watching this like 5 years down the road. And if I recommend one, then, well, is it still going to be valid in a couple of years, or do I have to remember to come in and edit out myself saying that? I don't want to have to deal with it. So sorry, I couldn't be more helpful on that. Multiple workspaces at the same time in DWM. That's pretty useful. Is that still actively developed, or is that one of those? Because I know a lot of these window managers, that's what kind of scares me, is that some of them are just not maintained anymore. I don't know anything about DWM. That's why I'm asking. I have seen it like once or twice in use, but I know nothing besides that. So yeah, maybe you could let me know. Hi there, Matthew from Arizona. Good to see you. Nicholas mentions using Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. If you had to drop one, it would be Mac OS. See, that's kind of, how it's so different for everyone, right? So for me, Windows would be the one I would drop, but that's just my personal opinion. I'm not a Mac OS fan. I'd rather not use it, but if it was like Windows and Mac OS were the only things you can use and Linux doesn't exist, it would probably be Mac OS. And that doesn't mean that I'm like a Mac OS fan. It just means if I have two things that I don't really care for, I'm going to use the one between them that I hate the least. So it'd be kind of a hard decision, but I think Mac OS would probably win out. But don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be having a fun time with it anyway. So an old computer from work, Debian. The minute you say old, I say Debian, because Debian can have trouble on newer computers because the package base is like prehistoric and things are like 3 or 4 major versions behind it at any one time. But since the computer is already old anyway, it doesn't matter. And Debian's very stable. Debian's stable. It's called Debian stable for a reason. And you just need to make sure that your Ethernet is detected. So you could use like a live image. Normally you wouldn't use live for like a live image with GNOME on a server, but you can for testing purposes, just to see if like your hardware is working, you have a network connection, and then like before you install it, it's probably going to work. So just a quick tip. So Don, I would recommend HTOP or BPyTop. So we put that in there in the chat for you. Because sometimes process management is just about having the right tools. Like someone might feel like they're not making any progress learning how to manage something. That doesn't really, that could mean that just the tools you're using are just antiquated. There's nothing wrong with Top, but I don't even use Top, and I've been using Linux for like 2 decades or more, actually more than that. And Top just, I would use it when when it's all I knew about, but honestly, use HTOP. But when it comes to how you can learn more, try not to put yourself in a box that you have to know a certain amount or you should be at a certain level, because that's self-defeating. I've been using Linux for over 2 decades. Like I mentioned, I'm still learning. There's still new things that I'm learning. I learn new stuff from you guys as well. So you're never going to reach a point where you know everything. And once you find out, like if you do feel like you learn enough about process management and you're good at it, then that mindset, you'll just find something else you're not good at. And then, I'm not saying you would, but a lot of times people do that. So just be happy with what you do know and focus on that. And anytime you have a specific thing that you want to do, like you want to, let's just say you want to list zombie processes, learn how to do that one thing. Don't go into a video if you want to, or read or watch a video or read a chapter of a book on process management. If all you want to do is list the zombie processes, look for that one thing. Don't read an entire chapter about the subject matter that what you want to know is inside of, because you're just going to spend a lot of time. And how much of that are you actually going to remember? But if you look up individual one-off things that you want to know, that adds up over time. And that's when you see your knowledge actually skyrocket. Don't get me wrong, some people are really good at reading books and memorizing everything in them. I use books as reference, and nobody remembers everything. So just keep that in mind. What I would do is just keep a cheat sheet. Anytime you have to do a one-off kind of task, just save the text file like after the utility. So if it's process management, maybe it'll be like PS, will be the name of the text file, and put your relative or related configs in there or examples. And then you have your own thing that you can refer back to. So Parth mentions that, so let's see what it says. I struggle with Debian, but I am comfortable with Ubuntu. What is your take on the base OS versus using a derivative? Use Ubuntu. There's no reason, if you're struggling with something, that you should be forcing yourself to use it. I know I have a lot of Debian fans in my audience, and I am a fan too, but I will speak, about pros and cons of things equally. So some people might read this like, I hate Debian. Debian does have some legitimate cons. I can't sugarcoat that. It also is a great distribution that's super stable and is loved by many, has like the biggest software base ever. I could also speak a lot of good things about Debian as well, but Debian does an absolutely terrible job of hardware support on laptops and desktops. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people use Debian on laptops and desktops and have no problem whatsoever. So if you use Debian and it works great for you, I'm not judging you at all. But Ubuntu does actually do way more for laptops and desktops than Debian can ever hope to achieve at this point with their current mindset, because with Debian, they're perfectly happy stripping all the proprietary drivers, even to the point where your hardware might not work. And Ubuntu, it will include things. Now, of course, proprietary software is bad. Proprietary firmware is also bad. But as bad as that is, you want your wireless to work. You want your GPU to work. I mean, you have hardware. It's not your fault that your vendor doesn't open source those things. So there's really a kind of a catch-22 here. And Ubuntu's mindset seems to be that they also don't like proprietary software and firmware, but they'll include it if they absolutely have to get you up and running. Whereas Debian's like, go check the wiki. Now we could argue that Debian's stance is good here, either way, because that's not like a bad reason they're doing this. They're not trying to like make things hard on their users on purpose. No one at Debian is like, let's make it hard for everyone. But I do feel like their standpoint and the fact that they do less for laptops and desktops means that Ubuntu is often the better choice. Hopefully, though, Debian comes up with some kind of compromise to make that better for everybody. That being said, there is an alternative version of Debian with non-free firmware in the ISO. It's unsupported, but you can get it if you Google for it, and maybe you'll have better luck with that. But long story made short, don't let people that are shaming Ubuntu stop you from using it. Use what you like and use what works for you. That's basically what I tell everybody, and there's no shame in that. If Ubuntu is good for you, then just keep using that. If it's good, then yeah, there you go. What type of UPS power supplies? APC currently, and you might take that as an endorsement, but it's not that it's not an endorsement. It's just that it just so happens to be the first thing I ever bought, and it worked in Linux, no problem. And the second one I bought worked. So I'm just going to keep buying APC only because it just so happens to be the case that anytime I've used one, it's worked with Linux. So I just haven't had any reason to buy anything else. It is very possible other UPSs are, great, but I don't know. If I try something and I land on the first thing that works, I'm just going to keep using the first thing. So APC is the answer to your question. So Michael, with Ubuntu, if you want to connect to an Active Directory controller, Ubuntu has that built in, literally to the point where when you install Ubuntu, it's there during installation. Just keep your eyes open for that. I can't remember. I think it's like a checkbox that enables another screen. It's not hard. It's not easy to miss. It's right there. You just have to make sure you're looking for it. And I haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but it's not the first time Ubuntu's done this. For several versions, they've had this out. So with every version, I'm sure it gets even better. I haven't heard any complaints. I haven't heard anybody yelling about it. Like, it doesn't work for me. So I haven't heard any complaints. So it seems like it's promising. It might even be great. It is something I'll be looking into. I just don't have NET on that, but it is built into Ubuntu. I'm pretty sure Fedora, correct me if I'm wrong, someone, if that's not true, but I think Fedora also has that. So you could actually do that. All right, so keep going. Yep, 389 directory server. That is the Fedora directory server. Yep. So there's a lot of love for Zorin out there, and no judgment. I've never liked it personally, but that's just a very personal reason. It's not a a Linux expert stance, meaning that I don't like it, so it's not good. No, I just personally, it just doesn't resonate with me in particular. Doesn't mean it's bad. It resonates with a lot of people. A lot of people like Zorin. I'm just not one of them, but you know what? If a lot of people like it, then I guess it has to have some value. Otherwise, everyone would hate it. So good for Zorin to have a really sizable following. So I was asked if I try Arco Linux, and no, I haven't tried that yet. For me, being more of an educator, I like to use the as much as I can when I'm going over a video. Like if I'm going over Arch, I like to use vanilla Arch, for example. And Arco, I think, is based on that. So I just don't really like the offshoots or their derivatives as often. Ubuntu is like the exception to that, because you could argue the same, Debian is what it's based on. And here I am using Ubuntu, but even twice so, because I use Pop! OS, which is based on Ubuntu. Ubuntu is based on Debian. So I'm a couple levels out from the main thing there. But, for me, that's just the way it goes on that. And when it comes to that, I would Arco Linux, I just kind of cater towards regular Arch Linux. Another reason why that's the case is I don't like to have anything done for me in Arch Linux. I like to do it all myself because I feel like that's kind of part of it, part of the fun. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having something done for you in Arch if you like the layout, so no judgment on that, but it's just not something that I really wanted to try, although I probably will try it at some point, even still. Is there any advantage of getting a Windows-based laptop and dual OS it with Linux? Um, Really, it really depends on you and what you use, right? Because if you have some software that just will not work on Linux at all, and I've seen people that might have this one program, and it's like the one thing they use on Windows, and they really don't use it often, maybe like once every 3 months, but they just don't want to lose it for the one-off chance that they're going to use that software again. They'll just maintain their Windows just for that. It really kind of depends on what your use case is. And personally, I don't like dual booting, but that's just me. Like I mentioned earlier, I feel like OS's operating systems are a one-to-one match. Device operating system, it's a one-to-one, not one-to-many, but just because I feel that way doesn't make it invalid to dual boot. Many people do that, and they have great success with dual boots. And I've even done videos about it. So even though I'm not a fan of dual booting, I'll still support you guys, and I'll still make a video about it, because it's not always about what I like. It's about what you guys like. So now, Michael, so you mentioned that you won't get your license back if you put Windows on the laptop. That's actually not true. The license is built into if it's OEM and it came back with your, if the Windows operating system came with your computer and it's Windows 8 or newer, then the license is on the hardware. You will not lose your license. So no, that is not true. You will never lose that license. That is not the case. What you do in this case to reinstall Windows, if you do that, is when it asks you for the product key, just tell the installer that you don't have one. Now there's one built into the computer, but it's asking you to type it in. Don't just say I don't have it. Normally that activates demo mode or evaluation mode in Windows. And then when you log into Windows after the install, it'll interrogate the hardware, and sometimes it's only after you install the drivers that it's able to do this. But once you have the drivers installed, then it'll interrogate the motherboard and see that you have a license, and it'll automatically clear that activate Windows thing, and then you're fine. If you have a retail copy of Windows, then you're going to have a product key. You could reinstall that. And if it doesn't let you for any reason, you could just call the 1-800 automated number to have Microsoft reset the activation for you, which I've done myself back in the day, and I've walked other people through doing the same thing. So, yeah, I can understand why you might think that you'll lose your license, but you will not lose your license. That is not the case. It's probably just a matter of how you reinstall it. But your license is there. It's not going anywhere. All right, so I want to get some more questions about our topic at hand, which is Linux switchers. So switching from Mac OS or Windows to Linux or anything like that. I'll keep this going probably at least 10 minutes here, depending on the number of questions you guys have. So I want to try to get some more on-topic questions for this, and I'll probably try to come up with more live streams later, so that way we could have other subjects as well. So Nicholas is wondering if Google Chrome supports video hardware decoding on Linux. I don't know. So can someone help him out? Because I don't use Google Chrome at all, except for like one-off things when if I do run into an issue where my main browser, Firefox, something isn't working there. It rarely ever happens. I might open Chrome as an alternative browser if I have an incognito window open for a config server that I'm not wanting my config saved on. So there are some use cases for Google Chrome, but I'm not really a Google user, so I don't know. But hopefully someone else in the chat might understand if that's the case and be able to help you out, I hope. All right, so this chat is scrolling right now, so I'm trying to keep up with it here. So bear with me. So Windows subsystem for Linux or dual boot, it depends on the use case. I always prefer like actual hardware installs. I think WSL is something I would recommend for someone who works at a company that won't let you put a different operating system on there, but you still want to use Linux. Then you could probably get a compromise based on that. But if you're not compromising, then I don't usually like it, because I just like to use the real thing, not some kind of re-implementation of the thing. So is WSL Linux? Yes. But is it Linux? No, because it's not quite the same thing. It's mostly the same. I just pretty much prefer to have that. So to have actual Linux. So Stephen, you mentioned that the compositor keeps freezing. I doubt this is your problem. Run memtest. You'd be surprised. Sometimes a weird problem could just be because of bad RAM and everything works except one thing. Probably less than a 5% chance that memory issues are your problem, but I would just say, to do that and rule it out at least. I used to use Plasma for a while. I haven't used it as my daily driver in a long time. I actually stopped using it because it was always crashing for me. It was just so unstable. I couldn't rely on it. And I used it for a long time. It wasn't like I used it for a week. I mean, years. I started with KDE, now Plasma, back when it was KDE 2, and I lasted through the majority of the 4 series. I liked KDE that much. But near the end of the 4 series, I just could not stand the instability anymore, and I just had to be done with it. And I've never looked back since. And that's not a criticism of Plasma, though, because I have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They've probably fixed everything by now. But for me, it's just like when I have been using something that long and it failed me like repeatedly, then it's just becomes a mental block at that point. There's no reason for me not to use it now. And I love the features that they're coming out with. And I have to assume they're more stable now because people have said that, but I can't vouch for it. So test your memory. And if it's still a problem, then you could have, and it's very common with Plasma, something with your driver that is just not something that Plasma can get around, and other desktop environments might. So I know you're not trying to use a desktop environment that's outside of that, but unfortunately, you might have to until that's fixed. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. All right, what else do we have here? All right, Michelangelo, love your screen name. So, yep, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Awesome. Glad to have you. I haven't tried NixOS yet, so unfortunately I can't give you information on that. So Michael, if your computer came with Windows 8, Windows 10 or Windows 11, you didn't lose the OEM key. The only way I could see that as being possible is if you have a computer from a very small company that might not have the industry presence to know how to customize the firmware and include the key there. Make sure you say, I don't have a key when you reinstall. I really don't see any scenario where an OEM key on your laptop can be lost unless maybe there's some kind of way that there's some kind of firmware debacle that wiped out something, but I've literally never seen that happen. So you really shouldn't have that problem. That's literally a problem that should not exist at all unless you have unless Windows 7 came with your computer. But even if that's the case, you could reinstall Windows with a Windows 7 key. That still literally still works. If you have another computer with a Windows 7 key or a Windows 8 key, you could argue whether or not that's a valid key. I argue that it is, because if Microsoft accepts it and it's a legit key from a computer and Microsoft themselves doesn't have a problem with that, and they don't, and they activate it, then honestly, you could just do that. But really, I would just say you should probably look at how you're reinstalling Windows. Again, unless your computer came with Windows 7, then there should be no possibility for that being the case. Anything I miss from Windows? Nope. I feel like at first, when I first started using Linux, it was more like I just didn't understand the mindset of Linux and why everything is different. But once I did, then once I got it, I just couldn't really think of myself ever going back to Windows again, because everything in Windows to me just feels like a major downgrade in every category. I don't know why it's a personal thing on my end. I really don't miss anything, to be honest with you. Like Windows could cease to exist tomorrow and it wouldn't bother me at all. So yeah. Oh, good. So DWM is actively developed still. Thank you so much for letting me know that. That was from Peter. So Mark, I have run across the speaker volume being lower in Linux. And usually it's in your settings. There's a checkbox that where your audio is kind of lowered a bit. Also try Also Mixer on the command line, because you might have like a hidden sound meter that you have to enable, which is kind of weird. Some sound cards are really wonky in Linux anyway. It's just the way it is. Creative had some real stinkers out there back in the day. But nowadays, it really shouldn't be so much of a problem. The worst case scenario seems to be that hidden slider. Like you might have like the volume slider visible, but you have a master slider that's down low. So you have the main volume low, but then the volume control you can see all the way up. But what you might not know is you have to push up the master one as well, and it might not be visible in your audio slider. So you might want to double check that. So would I recommend Arch for software developing and pen testing? I would say use a container. Just build a container with all your tools in there, and then it doesn't matter which OS you're using or which distribution you're using. As long as it has access to Docker or whatever type of containerization that you're using. I don't really know if I see any reason to use Arch specifically for those purposes, but just build a container. It's fun. And then you have this container that's portable with all your tools in there. You can just use it on whatever you want to use it on. So that's the ultimate power, in my opinion. All right, so let me get caught up one more time at least here and see what I have missed in the questions. So the speakers on my table are the Edifier brand, I think. Yeah, Ediffier. And these ones I bought specifically because the reviews were saying that like it's not like it's good for music and it's rated well for that, but it's rated even better for vocals. And when I'm editing videos, I need to hear the vocals, as clearly as I can. And these speakers are really good for that. So that's why I chose those. Yeah, the hidden master volume control doesn't sound great. I blame the drivers for that, or whoever, or the manufacturer basically could be to blame, or if the driver is donated from the manufacturer, the vendor, it could be the problem. It's not hard to get around, and once you configure that, I don't think you should have to do it again. I think it's just like the one time, and then if you reinstall, then you'll probably have to move that slider up again. But after you do that, you shouldn't have to do it again, so it shouldn't be so bad. Yeah, I'm a sucker for wood too. That's why I have wood grain everything, except for the wall behind me. So there's that. All right, I thought I saw there's a question I wanted to answer, and then I lost it. So that's why I'm taking so long here. So bear with me. So how long do you think it would take for a total noob to get comfortable with Linux? It depends on what comfortable means for you. I don't think it's going to take like a year. It's just basically if you're talking about desktops and laptops, depending on how fast you learn, I think the average person can learn what they need to know to use it comfortably in a week. It just depends on what you're trying to do with it. If you're doing like, machine learning and some advanced development or something, it'll take longer. But if you just need to know how to open up programs, install programs, update the system, reboot, create a user account, access the internet, connect to Wi-Fi, those types of things. Honestly, I don't think that should take more than a week. Now, if you're trying to learn advanced Linux like command line and computer science kinds of things, you're always learning, and I'm always learning. And I learn from you guys as well when you guys let me know something that I didn't know. So you'll never know everything, but to be comfortable, it really just depends on how much time you put into it, what comfortable means to you, and you'd actually be surprised how fast you could actually learn it. All right, see what else we have here. Which mouse am I using right now? I have two. So this is recording, or excuse me, controlling the computer that the live stream is being done on, the same computer that I actually record from. And then that's controlling that. And this is, for my laptop. These are both Logitechs. This is an M330, so it's just for a laptop. It's tiny and it's quiet. That's why I have this one, because you don't really hear the clicking. So do you hear that? I doubt it. You might, but it's super quiet. This one here is the MX Master 3. They have it in a completely different color. Normally it's black, but I like this color a lot. So that's why I have this one. This is my main mouse. So it's for this computer right here. This is the mouse for this one. So this is what I'm using. But I have the recording PC, which is right there. And I have the keyboard and mouse networked. So literally I'm here controlling this computer, and then I just move the mouse cursor off the edge of the screen, and it's right there. You can't see this because it's not, the screen recorder can't work there, but the same mouse goes back and forth. So usually when I'm doing live streams, I like to have the mouse over here. So if I need to mute myself, and then I can unmute myself, as you see. All right, so maybe someone deleted that question I was looking for, but anyway, let me go back down and get caught up again. Which email client do I use? Thunderbird. Thunderbird is something that I've found to be the best for my use case, and I've tried all of the other ones, and for me, nothing compares to Thunderbird. It does everything I needed to do, and some of the other alternatives, they have features that just end up annoying me, honestly. Thunderbird is older. It's been around for a while, but it's tried and true. So that's what I use. How to downgrade your kernel, that really depends on your distro. And I would say you should probably make a bug report. to whatever your distro is if it's not working for your hardware, because that's a serious problem. If you're having that problem, then someone else is also having that problem. So by reporting that problem, you could actually be helping more than yourself. So do you think we will get Wayland support in Barrier? I hope so. I use Barrier a lot. I use it every day. So if not, that'll make me very sad. So how can I get Discord to start when I sign in my GNOME desktop? There should be an auto start setting right there. Different versions of GNOME handle this differently. If you go into settings, if I remember correctly, let me go on my laptop and see if I could find it here. So if you go to settings, and I'll try to talk you through it. I know you can't see this. So you go in GNOME to settings and then applications. So I guess it's not there. I thought that's where it was. So there should be a startup control center here. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So if you go to your application launcher and just type the word startup, for me, the option comes right up there. So see if that shows up. It shouldn't be too hard. That's where you do it. If nothing else, I think GNOME Tweak could probably help you with that. So yep, another Thunderbird user. That's great, Peter. So what's the best source for finding alternative applications? Honestly, I don't know of any one source. Usually, like when I Google this, I find that I end up on these sites that really aren't that great, that kind of just, I could search for a Linux alternative to whatever, right? And then I'll be on, I'll get search results that are like Windows alternatives for, no, I didn't ask for that. I asked for Linux. But if you do search for Linux alternatives for app name, that's usually what I do. And I might have to scroll down a little bit. It kind of depends on what you are looking for. Now, personally, when it comes to Office, for me, it's LibreOffice. For editing photos, it's GIMP. So just to kind of give you a head start there, browser, Firefox, you could use that on any OS anyway. Thunderbird for email. Terminal, I change pretty much every other month. Right now, it's Alacrity. I was using GNOME Terminal last month, so, changes every now and then. So someone here mentions that Linux was never attractive, but you're giving another shot. I appreciate that. Now, some Linux distributions just will not resonate with you. Like you will try it and you might be like, this is the worst thing ever. Like, how does anyone like this? This is just, I can't even stand this. Now, of course, give it a fair shot, obviously, but there's people that do give it a fair shot and then they hate it, but they might hate that desktop environment. They don't hate Linux. There's different desktop environments. So what I would do is try a Linux distro with GNOME, like Fedora. Try one that customizes GNOME, Pop! OS. Try one with XFCE. Try one with Plasma and Cinnamon as well. And basically just try the different desktop environments. What I think will happen is that one of them will resonate with you more than any other one. And then you could just use that as your qualifying factor to use Linux, to use a Linux distribution. It has to have your desktop environment as its desktop environment. So that'll narrow it down quite a bit. But you just got to find out which one you like the most first. And then after you do that, then the rest should literally just come like a lot easier. All right, so. All right, so let's have some other questions, guys. If you want to ask some additional questions in the chat, I'll give you guys a few more minutes, and I do have to run. I skipped lunch. Ooh, so I'm actually kind of hungry right now. So I was actually trying to go for another 14 minutes, but I don't think I'm going to quite last. See what comes in here. I know there's a bit of a delay, so I'm just waiting for the chat to catch up with my voice. Favorite desktop environment is GNOME. So that's for Tin Man Ed. Thoughts on MX Linux? I like that a lot. MX Linux is a heck of a lot of fun, and it's one of the best distros I've ever used. Pop! OS I personally like more, but the only thing I don't like about MX Linux is that it doesn't have systemd. I don't really care for that anti-systemd movement. I think it's just way blown out of proportion. I'm not saying that's why they made that decision. That without systemd would actually stop me from using MX Linux. That's a requirement for me because it's the way forward. I know some people don't like it, and I'm not trying to start that flame debate here, but I will say though that MX Linux is fantastic, and most people aren't going to care that systemd isn't present, because if you don't even know what systemd is, then you don't care, right? But if you do know what systemd is and you still don't care, then you still don't care. MX Linux, outside of that one thing, has like the configuration, some of the most amazing and intelligent decisions in the way that they do things, and they go, above and beyond to make Debian work better for their users, because normally there's some compatibility issues with Debian. That's just the way it is, but they actually work to make that better. So I would even say MX Linux is probably the better Debian than Debian. So let me know if you guys agree on that. I think it's actually pretty good. Oh, you could choose systemd on MX. When I didn't know that was the case. I guess the last time I looked at it, they had that disabled. And then I looked into the documentation at that time. They said that wasn't something you can do. So if they've added a way to switch to that, then that's awesome. That was like the only problem I had with MX Linux, to be honest. So you may have just solved my only issue with it. Yeah, Proton definitely makes Linux gaming possible. That is absolutely the case. And just to give you an example, I've been playing the Pixel remaster of Final Fantasy VI. I spent like over 90 hours on it. So even though I don't play PC games a lot, I do sometimes, and it worked under Proton. So, even though it's not a Linux game, it definitely worked. Now, there's still going to be like, some, I mean, it's still the case you're trying to get something to work on a platform it wasn't meant to work on. But if Proton gets the job done, then it gets the job done, and that's awesome. And if Proton is able to get every Windows game to work, that'd be even better. I'd prefer to see native ports, but some developers will, some won't, and there's nothing we can do about it. So Ryan, I'm actually glad that you brought up Hibernate. I don't know why that's lost popularity. What I like is suspend, then hibernate. And how many people, I want to know right now, how many of you people in the chat right now were already familiar with the fact that Linux has a suspend then hibernate feature? I'm not talking about separate features for suspend and hibernate, which it does have, but I'm talking about another option, which is literally called suspend then hibernate. If you already knew about that, let me know. I want to know how many people knew that existed, and then I'll answer your question once I get an idea here. How many people are aware of it? So we have one person so far that's aware of it. 2. So, and someone suspend doesn't work at all for that person. That's not good. Now, Fedora is actually, someone mentioned it's not available in Fedora. That's surprising, because I didn't know that feature existed until, I want to say, a year or 2 ago. And it was Fedora that made me understand that it existed, because for some reason on whatever computer I had, Fedora set that up for me. And I didn't even expect that to happen. Like, I literally put my laptop to suspend and I forgot about it for days. And I go back to the computer and it's off. So I assume immediately that the battery was drained, probably, right? I mean, it makes sense. So I power it on and it resumes back to what I had open, and the battery's fully charged almost. Like, what? And come to find out, suspend then hibernate. That's what it does. You put your computer on suspend. So when you choose the suspend option, if you have this enabled, you choose suspend. So you won't see it as like a option, but you just click on suspend. Your system suspends like it normally would. But if you don't wake it up in a certain amount of time, which I don't know how long, it could be a certain number of hours, it'll wake itself up and then hibernate. And I'm having very much a hit or miss situation here. I'm in the middle of troubleshooting this because I want to find out what's required to make this work. And I have most of the requirements figured out. There's just a few edge cases I'm trying to figure out. What my goal is to just let the people at System 76 know what I had to do to get it going, and see if they're interested in my research to try to make that part of Pop! OS for everyone that wants that feature. That being said, I'm not assuming that System 76 will automatically accept this if I give this to them. They might not be interested. I think they will be. We'll see, but it's just a good thing to do to let them know. But basically, there's a few config files that you have to edit to turn this feature on. It's turned off by default. Your swap has to have enough space to hold, basically everything in memory. So that's a big swap partition. But considering that SSDs are getting cheaper now, it's not as big of a deal as it used to be. And that's exactly what it'll do. Suspend. And then after a while, it goes to hibernate, which is just so cool. So I'm testing it on 3 laptops. I have it working on 2 of them. And I'm just looking at what's required to make it work on the 3rd and why it's not working currently. So I probably will do a video on this, actually. And this will be my preferred way of hibernation. Start with suspend and then just go into hibernation. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Thank you, Cody. I love having you. I love having you guys. Doing this. This channel is just so much fun. Like, I can't even believe that I can make a living doing this. Like, really? Like, I'm just having so much fun. I feel guilty. Like, I'm not even supposed to like it as much as I'm liking it, but it's really great. Ryzen and suspend is still tricky. So Peter, often when that happens, in my experience, when you have suspend and it's not working, or hibernate and it's not working. Hibernate could just be an issue that your swap needs to be bigger, but let's just assume that it's already big enough. And it's a chipset problem. Like you said, Ryzen is having problems. Usually what that is, though, is that your distribution and or your kernel is older than your CPU. Because again, your Linux kernel, your distribution, it can't know about hardware that came out in the future unless the distribution developers have put out like a newer kernel, a newer update to make it aware. Most of the time they don't. So often what I see is that you have a Ryzen or something like that, and maybe something's not working. The next major version of your distribution, it'll probably work fine. That's usually what what ends up happening. So if I'm right, then that would mean that Ubuntu 2204 should have no problem with it. So hopefully that works. But I've seen this happen so many times, and it's usually this cat and mouse game or race condition between Linux kernel version and when your chipset came out. And if you're running Debian, then you're probably like 3 versions behind in your kernel. So you'd probably have to install a newer kernel from another source if you're running Debian, or just wait to the next version of Debian, or maybe even consider Debian testing if that's your flavor. All right, so my understanding is that you do have to have swap enabled for hibernate. However, there are alternatives to hibernate as we know it that, in my understanding, is that they try to get away from that. So what I would do is just create a swap file. It's probably easy enough to do it that way. I think Tux on Ice was one of the alternatives. I don't even know if that's still a thing, to be honest. I might be dating myself. Is that still a thing? I don't know. But for me, in my testing, though, I did have to have swap enabled for hibernation. And when you have a computer with 32 gigs of RAM, that's a pretty big swap file. So obviously, if you have a 64 gig hard drive, you're not interested in spending 32 gigs of that in swap. You are not interested in that at all. If you have like a 2 terabyte SSD, okay, we could kind of make a case for probably 32 gigs at that point. But my understanding is, yes, I'm still looking into this. I don't know when I will have the video out. I still have to figure out why it's not working on the 3rd machine, so that I have a well-rounded understanding of what's required, and then I can let you guys know what's required to make that work. Thank you, Tin Man Ed. I really appreciate that. That was awesome. I don't have any thoughts on Intel Optane right now, but I'm keeping my eye on it. So maybe I might have more to add another time. I'm just learning Linux right now. What should I not miss? So sometimes it depends on what you're using Linux for. I would just look at the, I might resume this series if there's enough of a demand for it. But several videos in my Linux for Noob series is a really good way to start. And I'm not promising this, guys, so don't get too excited. I am thinking, now I need to emphasize, I'm thinking about doing a podcast about entry-level Linux switching and make it a regular thing. But I'm also doing 2 other podcasts right now. I really don't know if I have time for that. But it's something I'm kind of, it's kind of marinating in my mind right now, just something that could happen. And maybe it will. So I'll let you guys know if that's something that happens in the future. I would need some kind of co-host. I need to find maybe someone who isn't as knowledgeable as me would be preferred. somebody that could be the new user in the podcast, and I could be the veteran. We can just go back and forth. Hey, what's bothering you this week, and talk about it, and talk about the journey. That's what I want to do. I want to talk about the journey of switching to Linux in a podcast form, but I just have to have the right co-host. But even if I did have the perfect co-host, I have to have time. And that is why I can't promise it. But just keep in mind it's something that could happen, so stay tuned. Yes, I am always excited for new releases of Ubuntu, especially LTS. So I am a little bit, I don't want to say upset. I'm a little bit annoyed that the GNOME version in Ubuntu 22.04 seems to be a Franken GNOME, as I call it, where you have, I think it's GNOME 42, if I remember correctly, but you still have some components of GNOME 41. And I'm like, really? Like they had two non-LTS releases at least to test GNOME 40 in, and they dropped the ball on that. So because they didn't have enough testing done, in 22.04, I was hoping we would have the entire suite and on all the versions, but now we have Franken GNOME. And I also don't like the fact that Ubuntu often maintains their own kernel rather than using regular LTS. Those are my main complaints there. And I don't think either one's going to be solved, but I will give you guys my final opinion on that. Maybe they'll reverse course with GNOME at the last minute. I doubt it, but you never know. And maybe it won't have a Franken kernel, because Ubuntu usually has a Franken kernel, where you have the not latest version of the Linux kernel with modules from the newer versions kind of like patched into it. So it's not quite the same Linux version that same version would be everywhere else. It's a Franken kernel. Now we have Franken GNOME. But other than that, though, Ubuntu is a fantastic distribution. I am very much looking forward to that, but I'm very cautious to see how they deal with GNOME and the kernel in this release. All right, so let's see if there's any good last-minute questions here. Is Linux good for a university student? So I have a master's degree, and I had no problem getting it using Linux and everything. I literally did. I just didn't tell the instructor that, because there are some instructors that would be so, like if you're using anything other than the standard, that's the problem. So I had to make darn sure that I saved all the documents in the Microsoft Office format from LibreOffice. So that way I would hand a .doc file or .docx file to my instructor, and it opened fine for them. They couldn't tell the difference, so I didn't have any problems there. There were a few times where I was forced to take this Microsoft Visio class, and I hated it. But I had to do it. It is what it is. So I just in VirtualBox had a Windows VM with Visio installed, like some kind of free trial version of it, and it got me through the class that way. So that was fine. So there were a few edge cases like that where I had to have a VM, but largely I don't think it's so much of an issue now. It just depends on what software you're running. So that might make the difference. Yeah, you challenged me to Mario Brothers 2 or Lost Levels. I would pick Mario 2. I love that game so much. I try to beat it every year. I'm not saying I'm super amazing at it. I do lose a few times, but I pretty much, I think I've cleared that game once a year, every year, or at least once every other year since like it came out. So that's one of my favorites. Maybe someday, this isn't a gaming channel, so I don't really know how well that would go along, but I do have a domain picked out for a retro gaming YouTube channel that I plan on doing. I just don't know when, because right now I just don't have time. I was going to launch it in fall. Fall came and went. Winter came and went, and the channel still isn't here yet. So it actually, what's funny is I got the domain for that retro gaming YouTube channel a year ago. It's coming up for renew like this week. I think it was this week. So that will go to show you just how long I've been wanting to do this. So if I do that, then I would say that would be a perfect place for that to happen. Cody, when did I change my walls? Probably a month ago. Now, here's the interesting thing. The videos that I upload are not in the order they were filmed in. So what you're going to see is some videos will have the wall like you see it right now. This is live. So what you see right now is exactly what it is today. But the video that I'm uploading on Tuesday is from before I did that. So you're going to see me and the wall from before then. Then after that, you'll see the wall again. I think that might be the one on Tuesday might be the last one that was filmed with the, before I did the wall, but there often is a month or two delay. So when I do something different to my office, if, since I do the home lab show live, then you will see my current setup in that live stream, but then you won't see what's current in the videos until the older content kind of filters out. Sometimes I could just record for a few months ahead of time. That's just the way it goes. So I guess what I'm saying is I can understand why you didn't know about the wall. It's been around for a long time, but most of the footage using or that where you see the wall is actually still on my hard drive and not on YouTube. So that would explain it. All right, so I'm going to end this right here. Actually, I did see one more since we were talking about video games. I guess I'll just snag this one as an off-topic last question. Have you played the new Kirby game? Yes, it is so good. Like, I love the heck out of that new Kirby game. It's not an open world game like I thought the trailer led me to believe, but it might actually be the best thing since Kirby Superstar. So that's just my personal opinion. But there's been some moments in that game that I literally laugh out loud when I see some of the things they have Kirby do that I didn't expect. So if you want a game to play when you're not, hacking on your Linux system, then Kirby is one of those that is super easy. I don't think I felt challenged at any point yet. It's an easy game, but that's okay because it's fun and I have fun playing it, even if it is a cakewalk. It's a great game, well put together. It's a total blast. So yeah, that's my video game recommendation, I guess, at least until I have my gaming channel. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. So this is the first Desktop Switchers live stream. I'm going to consider doing this again. I will do some additional live streams that may or may not be like Linux Switchers live stream, might be something completely different than this. But if I could come up with a better idea of how you guys could share your screen with me live and I could help you, that's what I want to achieve. That's the way to do it. And this is just kind of like a pilot. So I might give this another chance, try to get a way for you guys to be able to share your screen with me. And then once you guys are able to do that and I could just see your screen and what problems you're dealing with, I could try to help you out. That's what I will try to do. If you have any tips, go ahead and throw them in the comments, and I will see you in the next live stream. I don't yet know when that will be, but as soon as I know, you will know. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you around. I have a bunch of videos coming out, so stay tuned as always, and thanks for joining me on this live stream.